Evie, why should people listen to this episode of Pod Friends?
Okay, well, first of all, I really do think people should listen to all the episodes of Pod Friends. I'm just gonna put that out there. But in this one, you get a little bit of science. But don't be intimidated, okay? Don't be intimidated. It's not the whole thing. And also believe in yourself. You can understand science too, okay? So there's gonna be a little bit of science. There's gonna be a lot of queer shit, as always. There's gonna be some reflections on what it feels like that, I haven't, that it's been more than a year since I was on Survivor. I'm like in a different minute right now. If you listen to all the way to the end, you'll hear about some new tattoos I have. And how could you possibly turn it off before that? So check it out. And mostly you get to hear Matt ask really awesome, beautiful questions. So
Jokes, but thanks.
No.
Thank you. And the pride has spoken. Okay, now we're gonna go to the intro. This is where the song plays.
Pod friend.
You shouldn't have done that. That will be in the episode.
That's great.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Pod Friends. My name is Matt Scott. I am your host. You could find me on social media at MattScottGW and at Hey Pod Friends on social media. How are you doing? How are you doing this week? It was awesome hearing from so many of you after last week's episode with Mike Bloom, and I just want to send so much love to all of you. Mike and I talked about this, and it comes up in a bunch of the podcasts, but we don't always hear from folks with how they're feeling, how they're impacted, how these shows land, and it really meant so much to me, and I'm sure to Mike, to just hear how our conversation and a really vulnerable, heartfelt conversation that we had about so many different topics, including mental health, and just where Mike is on his journey, really hit home for folks. And, something that I want to become better at, and I'm working on it. I'm working on myself with this, but it's in not only, briefly reading the comments, because I'll see them come up and I'll read them, but it's really in digesting it. I for so long in my life have been really, really bad at accepting compliments. And, some people pointed that out to me in terms of like, oh, no, it's you're the awesome one thing, that type of thing that I know that most of us, if not all of us, do. And something that I want to work on, especially just in terms of, I'd say, my own mental health journey, and my own journey, feeling the love in different ways, because you could never have enough of that. And I could definitely use more of that. I think most of us can. It's just stopping and reading and replying and responding. And so if you left a comment somewhere on Facebook, I just found a new thread of comments about the Pod Friends episode that I want to check out and read through. But I'm going to try to go through and comment and just respond and let you all know that I appreciate you. I also hope that those of you who joined last week for the episode with Mike, or even are joining this week for the first time with this episode with the one and only Evvie Jagoda, are subscribed to the podcast, because I want to make sure that we're on this journey together. I think for a long time, I really viewed this as me having conversations with folks and highlighting them first and foremost. But I also think that this is a journey of our own, whether or not we know the guests as well. This is our journey to connect. And I hope that I'm asking the questions that you want asked, and that we're on this journey truly together. So to subscribe, you could do that, robisawebsite.com/podfriendsfeed. And of course, I mentioned where else you could find me. I'll leave some plugs at the end of the episode. But without further ado, I want to get into introducing this week's guest, Evvie Jagoda, who I've been so thankful to not only witness on Survivor and feel connected to as a queer person, just to have that representation that Evvie's provided for so many people, but also as a podcaster. Evvie and I, along with Grace Leader, a phenomenal podcaster and someone I've been able to do a lot of great gay and non-gay podcasts with, including a podcast on post-show recaps about the show Heartstopper last year, talking about Pride on FX with Grace and Brooklyn Zed. Shout out to Brooklyn Zed. And of course, The Pride Has Spoken. We had a great opportunity to talk about what the representation on Survivor has meant to us. And Evvie had great opportunity to talk with a number of Survivor players. I hope that we get to continue that. But for me, it was so meaningful to be able to connect with Evvie as a friend beyond the representation that they provided. And I am grateful for Evvie and grateful for each and every one of you who resonate with Evvie's story and are here, because we will talk so much up front about science. And I follow Evvie on a journey of learning about science and things. And then we get into queer stuff. We talk about Survivor. We talk about life. And this is really a great conversation. And I'm just so thankful that Evvie and I could have this, because I'm grateful for them and ready to do this introduction. Making their way to the podcast, hailing from Boston, Massachusetts, by way of Westchester, New York, they are a genetics research scientist, a Jewish community organizer, a Survivor contestant who we'd all love on our loved one's visit, the prolific co-host of The Pride Has Spoken on RHAP as a podcast, and a queer icon proving that queer is a superpower. A biker, a nature lover, a cook, an extrovert, and a friend to you, me, and so many. Please welcome the effervescent, exciting, empathetic, enjoyable, enlightening, encouraging, electrifying, insert other E-words here, Evvie Jagoda! Every time. Evvie every time, by the way, is a very every time. Yes, it's every time. I was gonna say, every time I try to hit record, I feel like I should do like a boom. Like, is that a nice effect?
There definitely should be a dramatic sound.
Wait, do you want to see something really dramatic right now? Because
yes.
I'm heating up right now for the audio listeners. Just
I have a guess.
This off. Bam! Bam! Watch the video version at robhasawebsite.com/YouTube. Bam!
That shirt is literally on fire.
It is literally. I mean, maybe that's actually why I'm heating up, but also it's really hot in here. So I just put that on. Evvie, what shirt am I wearing right now?
Matt is wearing the beautiful The Pride Has Spoken shirt, referencing truly an amazing time for both of us, I think, where we did our fantastic podcast with Grace Leader, all about queer stuff and Survivor stuff. And yeah, amazing shirts. You can probably still buy one.
I'm assuming. I think so. Go there. But yeah, no, it's been a minute since we've podcasted together. I think it was that The Pride Has Spoken.
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've done a podcast in general. There was a period of time, in the right after my season where I was doing tons of podcasts. I feel like I was very in touch with everyone in the RHAP universe, which was delightful. Mm-hmm. And then I really fell off. So it's really fun to be back in the dusting off the old microphone.
I have to say, I feel like the So I'm a fan of people taking breaks from things, even the things that they love. So I
Yeah.
do love a good podcast break here and there for like a month or two or whatever it might be. Usually that's like what it is. But how did it feel how does it feel to be dusting it off? Are you excited to be back? Are you begrudgingly picking up the mic again and you're like, screw you, Pod Friends listeners, I don't want to be here? Or is it like I'm just curious what that's been like?
Oh my gosh, no, definitely, it's an exciting feeling. I'm very happy. I'm really happy we're doing this. No, I mean the pause was much less driven by a desire to pause on podcasting, and more that I needed a little Survivor break was the major thing, you know. As I'm sure people can imagine, it's really, really intense. To be on Survivor. And then I think the season right after your season, it's so exciting that you get to be on all the podcasts, you know, and I was a huge RHAP fan. And so it was like really, really exciting to get to be like, oh, I'm now an alum of Survivor and I get to, you know, share my perspective. And I was really just like all over it. And then when 43 was happening, I had some personal stuff going on, and also just there was some element of it. It was a peak of excitement actually being on the show. And I was feeling like I want to watch Survivor 43 when it feels exciting to watch Survivor and where that feels fun, instead of a feeling of obligation or like I should do this to keep up with the thing because I keep up with the thing. I want, like, Survivor is a thing that brings me joy, and I wanted to watch it in a mode of it bringing me joy. And I think I'm about to start. I think I went on a couple. I needed a couple months break, but I literally actually just posted. I just reached out to some people saying like, "Yo, let's watch 43" because I haven't yet, and I'm excited. So this feels like the perfect time, Matt.
Wow. Do you know other people who similarly? You don't have to name names, but other people from your cast who took that step back from Survivor for the season.
I don't know explicitly. Oh, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I don't know explicitly if anyone else like actively like didn't watch it or anything like that, but I definitely have heard from several people that there's like, there's this fatigue, because I really feel like the 42 was still so exciting, like I said, because it was still like, wow, like now I'm on this side. But and I think you could see that like the 42 cast was like all over 43, you know. And I think that totally makes sense. And I think for all of us, there's some sense, or for a lot of us, maybe I've heard a sense of, you know, like it is a lot. I saw a hilarious tweet from Lydia from season 42. It was like, so am I supposed to tweet Happy Survivor Wednesday every Wednesday for the rest of my life? You know, something to that effect. And it is a good, you know, I mean, maybe. Or maybe I just think Survivor, people should relate with it however feels like fun and good, and I just never wanted to relate to it in any other way than that. So took the break when it felt right, but I was not intentionally trying to abandon my RHAP world. I mean, I definitely saw what was generally the Twitter streets, you know. I wasn't muting the hashtag. So.
I know. I feel like it's interesting, like having this conversation with you. And it's, well, one, just because it's always interesting having a conversation with you, but also like it's interesting having this conversation with you because I feel like this past season, season 43 of Survivor, was one that I've interacted with differently as a fan than so many others. And one of the reasons for that was because, like, on a much smaller scale than the second thing, like I did this like live reality game that I was vaguely plugging on The Pride Has Spoken, Survivor Philadelphia. And it was weird to be in a situation where like we get only 1,000 views per episode, but you have like 2 podcasts talking about you and your choices. And it's like, by the end of that, which was 10 weeks, I was just like, I don't know if I could do Survivor. And then of course 43 came along. But the thing that was bigger for me with 43 that jumped out is that along the way, I had so much interaction with the players through some of these events. And I felt like I became so personally invested in their journey. And by the end of the season, I don't know about them, but I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I can't have people bringing up Survivor, dragging certain people for things that they did or didn't do. But I mean, it's like the Survivor and mental health thing, I guess, is like a whole other conversation.
It's a lot, and it's really a lot. I mean, even like you know, I like to think that I'm like a pretty grounded person. And yet, you know, every time I tweet something, I know that, you know, I've like, you
Yeah.
know, over 10,000 Twitter followers, whatever. It's
Ooh.
like every tweet I'm like, oh no, what if it was, you know, like there's an
Yeah.
anxiety with that, you know, and I'm sure you have that as well on some level, like when you're doing
Yeah.
anything in the public. And so like,
Yes, Evie, I have anxiety about everything I do in the public.
oh, okay,
So you put it
perfect.
out
Same,
there. Okay,
same.
good.
All the cuties have anxiety, okay?
Ooh.
No, but seriously, you know, it's a lot. So like I think like and obviously Survivor, especially like, you know, watching 42 I was like, I know that spot. You know, I remember
Yeah.
being there. I remember, you know, these things happening. It really is
Wow.
like a very
Yeah. visceral
experience, especially now that, you know, they film it in the exact same locations every time. Like it really
Mhm.
like brings up a lot. And it's also is hard on some level to watch it and like, and even it's hard to even have an opinion for me for watching the show
Yeah.
on some, because I'm like, well, I know how much is missing in the show from the, and of course that's the fun part, is watching the show and having an opinion and, you know, thinking about what you would do. But there's
Yeah.
definitely some element of, you know, where it's a little too real for me on the level of, these are people and it's
Yeah.
stressful to see anyone be sad and go home and be hurt. Like it really,
Yeah.
you know, the emotional level's definitely still there for me.
Yeah, and I mean, well, it's interesting because we just dove in and are talking about that immediately. But I think like that for me is like something that's really interesting. Just like that, I don't know, the experience of being a Survivor person is interesting on a number of levels. But I guess part of it. And maybe this leads to your life beyond Survivor, but it's just that I know that with a number of folks from this past season, from all of the seasons of Survivor, even from seasons, you know, 10, 20 years ago at this point, even, that people will often ask about Survivor as opposed to their lives
Mm.
outside of it. And there's so much that's really cool and badass about you where I'm like, let's go there. And sure, I'm sure Survivor will sneak its way in again, in many ways, but the queer people do science.
Oh, queer people do science. I mean, a lot of people do science. I'm a queer person that does science. So yeah, I do science. I have a PhD in human evolution, and I now do genetics research at the Broad Institute. So I always think that's fun because obviously, I mean, obviously my job was mentioned on the show in some
Yeah.
ways, but like the actual what I do, or like it feels like a very, I've always been a person where I think like I have kind of two parts of my me, you know, where I have
Mhm.
this very like social reality TV, like fun side. And then I really have the science brain side as well. Yeah. I don't know. Should I tell you a little bit about what I do, and you tell me if it's interesting at all, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, you know, to really just put it, I'm not the science. I'm not the
Yeah.
science. I could do science as a
Yeah.
queer person.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Yes,
I
you could.
don't do science,
Yeah.
but I could, which I also feel like it's a whole other conversation about like
Yes.
the perceptions of people in science. I also will say this, that there's this great organization, and I love the folks who founded it, called 500 Queer Scientists,
Oh
which I'm
yes,
not.
I love that.
Okay, good. I'm glad that you know about them too, because they're
Yes.
phenomenal, and I love what they're up to. But like, I always feel like just like that basic thing. Most people who are listening to this are probably like, of course, like anyone could do science and be amazing at it. But yeah, I'm curious, one, about the kind of, to start from there, of like, what's the science that you're doing, but yeah, there's like so much more around that socially kind of happens when we bring in our queer identities to any space. And so
Totally. Oh
curious about
man, I have so much on. Okay, well, let's stay with that part for a second. We
that.
could
Ooh,
get, because I'm just like, okay, I feel like I'm just gonna dive into this thought that I have sometimes. So,
please.
you know, there was a time when I feel like I identified pretty strongly with the like women in science as a thing, you know, because
Mhm.
I think there's, you know, queer people, women, people of color in
Yeah.
general are underrepresented in STEM, especially BIPOC people.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's a weird thing where as I've been embracing my non-binaryism more and
Mm-hmm.
my masculinity more,
Mm-hmm.
uh, suddenly I feel like more there's like ways in which I blend in more in the rooms that I'm in, and then also I'm the only person that uses they pronouns, so I still stand out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's also an element where I've like as my career has progressed, I've also been somewhere in the transitioning
Mm-hmm.
masculinely, and
Uh-huh.
I sometimes say transmaskish.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's a weird element where it's like, oh, now I'm like more fitting in with the like traditional professionalism because I like wearing button-up shirts and I liked wearing sweaters that are like in the masculine form or something. And I think there's like something really I'm guessing other people, other AFAB people that have gone on this sort of journey can maybe relate to this in some way where there's like some element of losing that or like I don't know, feeling like I'm conforming more in some way with patriarchy, even
Yeah.
though I don't think that's really what's happening. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, no, it's interesting
Yeah.
to hear that, and it's fascinating because I feel like there's definitely a mental leap you have to go through to even like recognize that that's something that you're beginning to conform with, like, because I could also imagine a world where, I mean, I would just enter a space like, this is who I am, this is my
Hmm.
identity, this is how people treat me as it is. And so like to be able to like recognize the, I don't know what you would call it, but just like the shifts in how you're perceived is kind
Hmm.
of like interesting because it's also interesting because it's like in this space of the science,
Hmm.
that's what the people call it, the science,
The
I'm sure,
science,
the
yes, that's the
science,
technical term.
the
Yeah.
technical term. But
Yeah.
yeah, in the space of like the sciences, like that's one thing, but then there's also other spaces that I imagine that you could be in where it's like, okay, I still have I'm still received similarly, or similarly not as well because of my identities. So I
Hmm.
don't know, there's a lot there, but I think it's interesting that you're realizing it. Did it like take you time to realize the shift, or is it just something you've gradually noticed over time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, and that's definitely true. It's like it's also even like I'm sure there's some element where I think I'm like quote unquote maybe like fitting into this vibe more, and I have no idea if the other people think that. I still am like,
Mm.
yeah, like again using different pronouns. I don't know. You can see it more when I take off my long shirt. That I've got two new tattoos on my
Ooh.
arms, so I got I'm got a different. We can get there also because that's a new thing since my
Is-
Survivor time. Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh yes, that like there's
uh,
ways in which I fit in and ways when I less fit in. I actually feel like I noticed it a bit in like my PhD time
mhm.
where there was another woman in the lab at a similar level to me who's feminine in a lot of ways, and I feel like there's an element in which I don't know. I feel like I get taken more seriously sometimes in ways because I kind of have this. I think it's partially like me specific, but I think there is like there's like these masculine elements of me that I think do just like really fit into those sorts of cultures that just
Yeah.
is me, you know what I mean? And it's really been a really important part of me, my life over the last couple of years is really like embracing those sides more and more, and it makes me feel awesome. Like I freaking love
Yeah.
wearing ties, and that's where I wore like a tie in my cast photo and all that. Like that
Mhm.
makes me feel really good and really me. And yeah, and there's a weird element to it. And then of course there's all these times where I'm in, where I'm invited to be in a bachelorette party or, things like
Yeah.
that, all sorts of, feminine spaces that I feel mixed about. So like there's
Yeah.
all sorts of things there.
Yeah, and I feel like what you're saying though is super spot on, just in terms of like how like more masculine traits are
Hmm.
received. And it's something that's just interesting to me about masculinity and my experience of it, that's like really I don't know, like interesting to navigate or to negotiate, is that also it's like a queer black person man who is like navigating the world. And so like it's all these, like there are the privileges that come with that, and then there's like, I don't know, I guess I just have a hard time sometimes wrapping my head around like showing up into spaces, but maybe similar to what you're saying, it's, and to what you experience, it's like we just deal, you never know, like room to room, space to space. It's like a whole different vibe and energy that you might receive depending on who the people are and how they look at, you know, look at you and look at us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Weird.
You're right. And there's that's, you know, the whole thing with intersectionality. I mean, there's so many different lenses and combinations in which we are, which we have oppression and don't have oppression, and they're, you know, they combine to unique combinations, you know, for everyone.
Yeah, and what's one thing that's like super interesting about this is, you know, genetics, you know, like oppression and genes. Am I right?
Yes, a little
research
loop back
science.
there.
Yeah, I was just trying to get back to the question because people might be annoyed, like, Matt, you asked a question and you just moved on, which happens half the time. But
okay, I'm gonna tell you. I'm going to tell you what I do. I think I'm going to explain it in a way that you understand, but I really want you to tell me if I.
Do you want me to explain it back to you after you explain it?
Yes.
I don't know why I'm doing
confident.
that to myself.
You just made that more difficult for yourself.
I did, but
that would be a good sign of my teaching ability. Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay, so you've heard of DNA.
Uh-huh.
And so normally when people think of DNA,
the little thingy.
Yeah, the double helix
thing. Oh, yeah. Double helix, right? Exactly. DNA, yes.
So normally when people think of DNA, they think that's synonymous with genes. Okay? But it's actually not. Okay. Genes are actually only 1% of all the DNA.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Is your mind blown right now?
What do you...
Okay, so what genes are parts of the DNA that contain the information to make proteins.
Okay.
And then proteins go and like do everything in the body. Okay. So genes are this special part of the DNA that have the information for the protein. But the rest of the DNA actually functions to regulate the genes. So I like to think about it. The genes are like a light bulb in your house.
Okay.
And the rest of the DNA regulates that. The rest of the DNA is like the light switches and dimmer switches. So the rest of the DNA might be a part that says, okay, turn this gene on in liver cells and turn it on a lot in liver cells, like turn that dimmer all the way up. But actually in brain cells, you only need the dimmer part of the way down. So you have like a different regulatory thing that turns that gene on a lower amount in brain cells, or not at all in bone cells, or only when you're a kid, or only when you're, you know, between months 1 and 2 of gestation. Okay, are you with me? So there's the DNA and there's the parts of the DNA that regulate the genes, and there's the genes. That's what I mean.
Wait, so there's the DNA. Look, okay, so I'll just be very transparent. I have failed science classes in my life. I had to retake them, but it's a struggle. But I'm with you. There's the DNA and then the genes, but the DNA is like the light bulb.
Yeah, the genes are like the light bulbs.
Like the little. Well, the
no,
genes
I messed
are like
that up. I think maybe.
Oh wait, no. Evie, I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to do science. I'm trying to
Sorry,
prove to people
it's
what I
after
can
5
be.
PM. The science explanations are going to be worse.
So there's like the gene is like the light bulb, but the rest of the DNA, that other 99% of it is like the dimmers and all. And it basically is saying like, yes, you're a light bulb, but do you need to be on? Do you need to be off? And sometimes it's like, we don't need your light bulb to be all the way on because you don't need to shine as bright as you do as the gene. And so the DNA does the light switch thingy with the little thing, like when you go up to a light switch and there's a switch you could turn on and off, but you could also just do it up and down if you want to have a dimmer, more like, you know, more subdued lighting around you. I think I figured it out.
Yes, exactly. And like another way you can think about it is that every single cell in your whole body has all of the DNA. And yet the cells can do very different stuff. Like liver cells are really different from brain cells and bone cells and blood cells.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because different genes are turned on and off and in different amounts. And that's because of these regulators, these regulatory parts of the DNA, which are those light switches and dimmer switches. Okay?
I'm going to keep going with this. So yes, regulate. You got to regulate.
You got to regulate. So basically, because that is the regulation is 99% of the DNA, right?
Okay. Yes.
That means it's also where most of the mutations that are associated with disease are. Because it's just literally, first of all, because it's just literally more of the DNA. And second of all, because, well, we'll skip the second of all. Let's just for now say,
What?
well, okay, the second of all is because if you have a mutation in a gene that really messes up the protein in some fundamental way, often that can be fatal, right? So that ends up not existing a lot in the population. But genetic
Okay.
diseases that exist commonly in the population, and even rare ones as well, are often more caused by mutations in these regulators. So imagine your dimmer switch has a mutation in it, so the gene is on way too much or way too little or in the wrong cell, and
It
that's
starts
what's
to
causing
flicker.
exactly. It could
Ooh.
flicker, or it could be on in your house when you're not home, and that's wasting tons of energy for your body, and that's bad, you know?
So it takes away from the rest of the. But okay, wait, no,
Yes.
okay, yeah. So, but the regulators are the where the issue exists.
Right. In a lot of diseases, the protein itself is like structurally fine, but it's the
Mm-hmm.
wrong amount or it's in the wrong tissue or
Yeah.
because there's a mutation in a regulator.
Okay.
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 And basically, currently, we don't have a good map of what light switches control which light bulbs, which regulators control which genes.
Evie. I see an opportunity here
Yeah.
for you to be the one who figures out
Yeah.
which genes and the light bulbs and the regulators that go together. Because the DNA, the thing with DNA is that people like me misunderstand DNA and its power. We think that it's everything. We think that the DNA is all that
The genes, the
defines a
genes.
gene.
Yeah.
We know, and I know I'm a scientist too. I could be a scientist. We
Totally.
think that the DNA is defined by the genes, when in reality the genes are just like the light bulb and the DNA is like the light switch. But sometimes the receptors or reactors or
Regulators.
regulators.
Yeah. Regulators.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Revolutionaries, regulators. The regulators are the thing that bring in the mutations, which then ultimately lead to issues in how much is regulated. That's why it's called the regulators. And you are the solution.
Yes. So I'm part of a team that is basically working to build this map, to map basically where all these regulatory pieces of the DNA
Yeah.
are and which genes they affect, and therefore how mutations in them will affect the body, which ultimately will be like a huge, amazing resource that will really honestly have like a huge impact on our understanding of genetic basis of disease and therefore how to treat a lot of genetic diseases. And yes, so no big deal, but it's kind of a huge deal, actually.
Wow. I'm glad that we're still here, probably 20 minutes
Do you
later.
think everyone turned it off now because they were bored because that was too confusing?
I hope they did, because that was the point, to really weed out the weak from the strong.
Okay, well, if you're still here, you rock, and DM me and I'll explain it better.
And also, I'm still here. So if I'm still
Yay.
here, and you like, not only for you, Evie, but mostly for the fact that I could follow along enough to realize, like, okay, here's the problem. Here's what you're doing with your work. What was like what science do you, from in the very beginning, like what made you the person who's interested in this? Because I cannot relate to being this interested in science because of how complicated it could get.
Totally. Okay, but can I just push back on that for 1 second? I
You
feel like
can.
you, Matt Scott, deal with a lot of complicated stuff, you know?
Yes.
You like to go deep on a lot of things and, like, get into it, and, like,
Oh.
especially I'm experienced with you going in on it on, like, things about identity and depth and emotional things and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and so which is all quite complicated, and there's a lot of people that are good at science that aren't good at a lot of those things, so first of
This
all,
is true. This is
and
very true.
I really think there is a thing where yes, a lot of times when we're young, math and science are taught not that well, and people
Yes.
therefore think that it's really complicated and, you know, get really discouraged. And I just want you to know that if you had wanted to, you absolutely could have done science if you had wanted
Okay.
to.
I appreciate this. And I also just want to interject for a second and say that you just hit the nail on the head of something I realize that actually makes me like upset about the sciences and the
Mm,
like. But it's before getting into kind of how you kind of got attached to science, it's that I realized in retrospect that there was nothing wrong with me and my learning process, and that so much of it comes down to like how we teach these things and make them accessible to people and reach people at the level where it's like, okay, this will make sense, and give them space to ask questions and learn. So I
And
could
how
do
much we like,
science. I could
yeah,
be a
and how much
doctor.
we like make it seem like what's essential to your life and what's not essential to your life. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
science is part of like literally everything that's happening all the time. You know what I mean? But I feel like we don't emphasize it as something that necessarily everybody, you know, we're comfortable being like, you don't get it, it's fine. Where you wouldn't say that about reading, you know?
Yeah, I do know how to read.
Yes, I know
But
you
I think
do.
it's like it's interesting because it's a lot. I know a lot of people are in that place, as I'm
Mhm.
sure you know too, who don't connect with it. But like, what was where did that interest
Yeah.
spark for you? And I guess the other side question to
Mhm.
that is, was there like anything else that kind of drew your interest as you were
Ooh.
growing up, becoming the science Evie that we know today?
Ooh, this is such a great question. Okay. So, I mean, honestly, in terms of like how I got into it, I honestly a little bit fell into this being like my thing. So basically kind of
Mm,
in my high school, there was one you had to take one elective. And the choices were a second foreign language, which I truly am horrible at foreign languages, although probably the advice I just gave you about science is probably true about me in foreign languages if I really tried harder. But I think I'm pretty bad at them. Basically, a second foreign language, art, which I'm also
uh-huh.
pretty bad at, and or this class called Science Scholars, which is such a cute little dorky name of a class, where you
Yes.
basically do a research project over the course of over all of high school.
Mm,
And you learn about topics by reading science articles, and then eventually you intern at for the summer you intern with someone who's in science and you do a research project, and then uh, we go to like science fairs and things like that. And so I kind of just did that because I didn't want to do the other things and because my older sister had done that.
mhm.
Um, but I got really, really into it. So I like stumbled into, I was just reading about various stuff and I didn't know at all what I wanted to do. Like at first I was reading about like consumer psychology, and then I got really into coral.
Yeah.
And suddenly I stumbled upon this thing called mitochondrial DNA, which
Mm,
is a really cool part of DNA that most of the DNA is in the nucleus of the cell.
right.
Okay. But then there's also the mitochondria, which you might have heard of as the powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard of
I
that?
I'm picturing a diagram because I
Yeah.
remember growing up in science, and I remember making some projects where I actually like made a model of a cell where like you had the nucleus and you had the mitochondria, and
Yes.
that's all I
Yes.
remember.
Yes. Well, and what's really cool about the mitochondria is the mitochondria has its own DNA in it, which is separate from the nucleus DNA.
Uh-huh.
And that's because we think that mitochondria used to be its own freestanding organism that got like enveloped by like eukaryotic cells and now is like part of our cells, but actually used to be its own thing. That's its own
Mhm.
cool thing.
That's
Anyway, the thing about mitochondrial DNA, and now we're just like really in a science podcast a little bit. So
that's what the
bear
people
with
want
me.
today.
um, so what happens is that when a baby is being made, you know, there's the
Oh.
sperm and the egg,
Mhm.
and the egg has a ton of mitochondria, and the sperm only has mitochondria in the tail of the sperm. So
Yes.
when the sperm fertilizes the egg, all of the sperm's mitochondria fall off, and the fertilized egg, which then becomes the baby, only has mitochondria from the biological female.
Okay.
Okay. And therefore it makes it like a really cool type of DNA for looking at ancestry, because you can essentially like you have the exact same mitochondrial DNA as the parent that had an egg for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that person has the exact same mitochondrial DNA as the parent that had the egg for them, and all the way up. Versus your like regular
Hmm.
DNA, your nuclear DNA, which you have, you know, from both your parents, so it's like mixed up, and that's where you get like these like, you know, you're this percent this, and then you're this percent that.
Mhm.
Versus the mitochondria is literally like one straight line, essentially, all the way back to like your deep, deep ancestry. Does that make sense?
I was literally just thinking, I don't know why it has to be straight, but that's a whole other.
Oh yeah, why I gotta be straight? Hilarious.
Literally, like as you ask me, I'm like, that's literally what's going through my head.
Hilarious.
But this makes sense. This makes sense. But I'm so curious how your mitochondrial DNA influenced your interest in these topics.
So what's really cool about that is then scientists start doing these things of investigating. Okay, if people's mitochondria just like goes directly back like that, that means you could trace everybody's mitochondrial DNA back and find out these questions about like deep human evolution. Like when did some humans leave Africa for the first time? Like at what time did the most recent common ancestor of everyone alive today live? Based on looking at when these mitochondrial DNA sequences ultimately diverge. And there's what to me is so cool about that type of stuff is it's like you're using the most advanced modern day technology, about people that are alive today to tell you something about what happened hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's this kind of like cool intersection of science and like deep history and like storytelling in a way, that I feel like is super cool. So, and ultimately that led me on this whole path to ultimately get a PhD in evolution and learn about humans and Neanderthals. And like, again, the thing that I've always loved is using this genetic stuff to answer these questions about history and like the intersection, when humans came into contact with Neanderthals and like these kind of like crazy historical questions. So that was like the first round of excitement. What do you think about that?
Well, so I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because you are taking such a scientist approach to explaining where your interest stems from. And it's interesting because there's so much that's going through my mind, but it's also like seeing the blend of humanity and interests in humans mixed with science, which are not things that I always see come together. But then I also think of like just you outside of the science and where that meets you within the science. And even that is a powerful combination. And so the science is doing the science what it needs to be sciencing. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely. Well, and I think this gets to your other question where you asked, was there ever anything else that called to me? And there was a period of time where I was like, okay, when you think about a scientist, it tends to, be someone who you think of as thriving specifically in their like analytical skills and things like that, and less in their more social interpersonal skills. And I've really always valued my social and interpersonal skills as like my favorite part of me. I think that's like the deep connection stuff that I think is that I really love about myself. And it made me think, should I be doing something where that is the forefront of what, your job is based on those things? And should I, leave the analytical stuff for people that only thrive in that environment? But then the thing is that interpersonal skills are useful for literally everything in any profession ever. You know what I mean? Not to mention in every life. And actually being a scientist that can also, I think, generally get along well with others and, collaborate in those ways. And also, I think often meet people where they're at in terms of their understanding of stuff and try to be a good teacher. Maybe less so when you're doing a podcast and don't have a blackboard, because then I really could have nailed it,
writing it out. Reach out to Christian Hubicki, by the way.
Yes,
I know he has
exactly.
a few of those.
He always brings a whiteboard.
He does. He does.
That's why he's the OG Survivor PhD.
I don't have it in the budget, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, but anyway, basically, I think it's like what it turns out is, first of all, I don't think your job has to be the ultimate reflection of like all the things that you are. And second of all, it's just like, there's multiple parts of me and I bring that in various ways into what I do. And I think it gets to the same thing of like, we don't have to stereotype what a scientist is or what a not scientist is. And, and yeah.
Wow. Science is intense. And I think it's like interesting to hear you talk about it with such passion that I've
Mm,
also heard you talk about like social issues and life and our world with. But I want to even like take a step back outside of science to
mm,
like just ask, because there's so much of you and who you are that you've kind of just like put out there, and
mm,
as you've said, you've bared your soul and you're out there. But I'm so curious to like just give you the chance to connect the dots. Like, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? What was that like for
mm,
you?
mm.
And I mean, the bigger question I always have is like, how did that lead to where you are now? But like, just to focus on how you grew up, I'd love to know more about that in your own words, Evie.
Okay, I would love to. So, all right, I grew up in the suburbs of New York City in Westchester, New York, in Edgemont, which is for anyone listening near Scarsdale and White
Mm-hmm.
Plains. Um, and it's kind of a classic, like suburb, like you know, liberal democratic suburbs
Mm-hmm.
vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Although my dad's a Republican, so that's always been
Fun.
a thing. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I feel like, let's see, it's such a big question. How did you grow up? I'm Jewish. That was a huge part of my growing up. I grew up keeping kosher.
Uh-huh.
So I like never didn't eat pork or shellfish or anything like that for a long time. Um, yeah, and I feel like in general, yeah, where do people normally go with this question? I feel like whatever, don't even
I don't
tell me.
know.
I'll
I don't know.
yeah,
I'm like, when's the last time I asked this question
yeah.
exactly? But I guess, yeah, it's interesting just to hear you like, and I mean this with it's so beautiful, but word vomiting,
Yes.
where but yeah, I
Yes.
mean, I don't know. Does anything else come up in terms? I'm very
Yeah.
fascinated to see what comes to mind.
Well, some things, I mean, obviously I'm talking to you, so like issues
Yeah.
of queer stuff is always popping in my
Uh
brain.
huh.
And I think it's so funny because I really grew up in this place where, you know, almost everyone was a Democrat. That was
Yeah.
definitely like the vibe. But and there was definitely, I'd say, like a blanket, oh, of course gay people are okay. Like I feel like that was
Mm-hmm.
like the nominal talking point. And
Yeah.
yet there was only in my high school one openly gay person who was not me. He's actually one of my
Mm-hmm.
best friends. Even at the time was one of my best friends. But
Uh-huh.
I was like, well, I'm the straight girlfriend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like so weird now because neither of those words applies to me, straight or girl. And yeah, and since high school, like a lot of people have come out. And I
Yeah.
have this, it's like so weird because it's like, I think typically when you think of people not feeling comfortable coming out, you assume that, oh, it's like from a conservative place or like they wouldn't be accepted. And like, obviously, I really do feel like there was this general sense of like, oh, yeah, we all agree that it's fine. And yet it obviously deeply didn't feel like it was fine because there's so many people that really didn't feel comfortable coming out in an environment that came out not even that
Yeah.
much later, like in college or whatever. Um, and I think that really speaks to a lot of things, including that, like, it just is so hard to imagine uh, doing something that you don't see. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
obviously relates to why I thought it was important to be on TV. But I think even in any environment, there was only like, I wonder, like, if it had just happened that 10 kids were out, would there have therefore been 50 kids that were out? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's like that, is that effect of, when it is rare and scary, it's going to stay rare and scary. And I
Mm-hmm.
think not that anyone, yeah, I mean, obviously there's all sorts of like general messaging in the world in the 90s and early 2000s that was like
Yeah.
harmful, but I don't think that anyone specifically was doing anything wrong. I mean, my parents explicitly said stuff like, of course we'd accept you if you were gay, but there was also
Right.
still kind of a sense of like, but thank God you aren't. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to blame my parents for it. I don't think that was like a conscious thing, but I think there was like a general like, of course it's fine, but it's definitely harder. You know what I mean? Or
Mhm.
like your life will be harder, or you know, or like, that's, of course that's fine, but I don't want to look at it, or it's gross, or but it's
Yeah.
fine. Like it's fine, but
Yeah.
um And that's so, like, I can't even point to that many examples of, like, I can't think of that many specific things in which that was said, but somehow that's like in the ether. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's, again, in a supposedly liberal place. So when I think about people who are brave and come into their queerness in much more overtly antagonistic places, I just think that, you know, that's absolutely amazing and bold and scary as hell. And yeah, I was incredibly privileged, and still it took me till I was like 24 to even 23, 24, something like that, to even
Oof.
really let myself think that even to myself. And it's also funny
Wow.
because at the time I was like, wow, I'm so old. And now I'm 30 and I'm like, LOL.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Wow.
truly was a word vomit for me.
No, and we love the word vomit.
You know.
The word vomit itself is a gross word, but we love the word vomit.
Mm.
And you know, it's like yeah, it's interesting like hearing you talk about that because it immediately I definitely think of my own experiences where I could just echo like a lot of the exact things you're saying. Like, oh,
Mhm.
like we accept all sorts of people. We accept gay people. It's okay. Like, but also like it's this weird thing where I also feel like there's the realization of like you said like oh thank god that you're not gay or like
Right.
it's so much because like the funny thing I think sometimes about I'll say parents in general when their kid is like experiencing something is that there's so much that like I've seen lately especially of like the parents or guardians like taking that on often as like as their own struggle which they have which like I get that you know learning to not be homophobic or learning how to support your kid who's like going through something which you could imagine or know is different or challenging or difficult is its own tough thing but like I yeah there was like a certain flavor of of I don't even know what to call it. And that's maybe the biggest issue, I think,
Mhm.
because I, especially in doing the Pride Has Spoken
Mhm.
with you and with Grace Leader, and then doing the Heartstopper podcast with Grace Leader, I've heard from so many people in person at certain events and online who've kind of been in this place of like still not even coming out
Mhm.
because of the just the like not only the pressure but just like the homophobia even if it's not like the worst because a lot of people
Mhm.
will stop and say like you know they won't hate me or excommunicate me for xyz reasons but it's still difficult and it's like yeah that's valid just because you're
Mhm.
not in a place
Mhm.
that will like literally do violence to you because of what happened doesn't mean that it's okay
Mhm. And it's so scary, like, even
yeah
if you had felt like it was the most accepting place, it's scary in yourself to, like,
yeah
admit to be like, "Oh, wait, this way that I think that I thought I was or that I think everyone is or that's, like, the quote, unquote, normal way, I'm not that." Like, that is
hmm
really freaking scary, and our brains, I think, do a lot to try to, like, protect us from that. Like,
yeah
I was recently talking with a bunch of my queer friends about how we all had, like, various hilarious mental gymnastics we would do to convince ourselves that we weren't queer in various ways. Like,
yeah
for example, when I was in 8th grade, I
hmm
had a dream that I was making out with a girl from my lacrosse team. Now,
okay
that's pretty straightforward. You know, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And I liked it. Let's put it that way. I liked it. I woke up and I was like, oh God. But then I was like, no. You're not queer. It's just that she was telling you about making out with her boyfriend. So obviously in your dream, you just like imagine yourself in the boyfriend role and there's like nothing weird about that. And there's nothing to see here. And like, no, it's fine. It's fine. I'm not gay. It's fine. You know, and like the brain will do that, you know? And I
Yeah.
think it's actually like a lesson that I really tried to take. I really have tried to apply into other aspects of my life that I feel like I learned from the coming out experience, like the literal coming out to myself experience of like, there was this thing that I kind of knew about in my brain, but I was really afraid to even think about. I was afraid
Mhm.
to like even let myself have that thought all the way of like, wow, I had that dream. What does that probably mean? It probably means that I am queer, but that's too scary. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
And the lesson I really tried to take from it is just let yourself have the thought. you know, you don't even have to do anything about it. But just, you know, what is the scariest thought to have? And like, are you like really just allow myself to think that? And this honestly is a lesson that I've relearned many times, like, you know, when about anything, like, oh, I want to
Yeah.
switch a job, I want to move, I want to, you know, gender identity stuff. Like sometimes there are these thoughts that are like, ah, that's scary, I'm going to push that thought away.
Mhm.
And I really try to remember that the scariest thought I had for years was that I was probably queer, and actually letting myself have that thought all the way, experience that, is genuinely the greatest joy in my life. And I like literally can't imagine at all what my life would be like right now without that. And like,
Oh
it's
my
this
gosh.
like deep freaking joyous thing that I was like hiding from myself. And I'm not saying that every scary thought will lead to like ultimate happiness, but like I
Yeah.
do think there is a truth that if you are suppressing stuff, then you are limiting the degree to which you are being yourself, you know. And
Mhm.
ultimately, I think letting yourself be yourself in all of the ways is one of the keys to, I think, you know, authentic joy.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that too, which everything you said is so amazing. Like, I think the other piece, like, just continuing the train of thought, is that I also think that there's not a realization for people, whether you're queer or not, or regardless of your identity. I don't think there's really fully the realization for most people that our happiness and comfort and safety should be the first priority. Like,
Mm,
it's like, I need to do my job. I need to like,
mm,
ooh, I need to like do all these other things, show up for these people. I can't disappoint this person. I need to make this person proud. Um, and I think that like I feel like just recognizing that that is a priority, like living fully in your identity is a priority, even if that makes, you know, as long as it's not hurting other people in a way, you know, like some people will be hurt by you being gay, and that is not hurting anybody. That is their
yeah.
fragility
Yep.
and their own issue that they need to deal with. But like, as long as you are, you know, I think being yourself is so important, and learning to embrace that. I love what you said about like listening to those thoughts.
Mm,
I want to actually ask you and follow up to that, because I
mm,
know, like, I mean, even like having had a handful of people who've reached out to like me, I'm sure Grace has had the same thing in terms of just some of the podcasts we've done. Like, we've heard from people, but you've had this at a completely different level where it's like people who just see, like, literally just see, I was going to say see you on TV. There's that, but like literally like, oh my gosh, that's the queer look. Like, what? But is
yes.
that, I don't know, has there been like, is there certain advice, or have there
Mm.
been any moments where you've like offered sage wisdom or advice to folks as they have navigated? Because I know that a lot of those people are listening to
Mm. Oh
this
man. I
now.
mean, it's so hard also because I feel like I do have, I mean, like this thing of, you know, being yourself is the best freaking thing ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that is a huge piece of advice that feels really true to me. And it also like does, I always do feel nervous, you know, to give advice to anyone, because like who the hell am I, and my experiences are my experiences. And like I just, especially with you know, something I learned in doing the Pride of Spoken, you know, it really
Hmm.
also like caused me to reflect on all the different environments in which people really are wrestling with these. Like, especially was thinking of when we did the interview with Ty, who, you know, was talking about wrestling with his identity as, you know, an immigrant and in a refugee camp and like all
Uh-huh.
these things. And like, so just to say that there are definitely environments also where like, I can't even possibly imagine the danger someone's putting themselves in by coming out, you know? So I think
Hmm.
like one really important thing that I think is that like, you are valid no matter where you are in this journey, you know, whether you are the outest person, whether you are still figuring out within your mind, whether you know that you're queer and are not out for for any reason. You
Yes.
are so valid. And also like no matter what type of queer person you are, like I feel like I know so many people who are like bi and have always felt that there's no place for them in the queer community, or they're not queer enough, or, like, I just think there's so much feeling of inadequacy, imposter syndrome, that I think we all feel in various aspects of our life. And then just like anyone out there that's listening that thinks anything that I'm saying applies to them, like it applies to you, and like you're beautiful. And whether you're out or not, or know who you are or not, like you're wonderful, and I just like, and yes, hell yes. Matt is waving around. What even is that? Like a rainbow?
Yeah, it's a rainbow. I don't even know if it's like it's something. It's decoration.
Yeah.
But yes, like I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like it's like you are valid, you matter, you deserve to take up space, and it's even if you're in a situation where you're surrounded by folks who do not validate that. Like just hang on to even this. It's hard enough like to be a human, but let alone to be in a place where you're like literally where, I mean, I think of Grace saying this before when we did the Pride Has Spoken, but like literally people trying to legislate us out of existence or consciousness in different ways. But we're here.
Yeah.
Like, we're here.
And let's just take a moment, because we've skirted around a lot. Grace, if you're listening, we love you. We miss you.
Yeah. No, we love you so much, Grace. Pop in.
I feel like it's weird that it's just the two of us. I'm like, where's Grace? Hi, Grace. I hope you're listening. We love you.
I left my Grace cardboard cutout somewhere, so I don't have Grace with me. But
what the hell?
Yeah.
No, but I really, really hear that, and it's a terrifying world that we're in right now, and it's like this really, it's such a freaking weird thing, 2022 or 2023 I should say. Where it's both,
yeah,
I think there is a way in which like society, like things are getting better, and also things are getting worse, and it's this like where there's more trans representation, more queer representation in so many public things, in government, in media, and yet there's literally legislation to make it illegal to get gender affirming care. Like it's, I mean, such a freaking mind fuck. And it makes me think in the like organizing worlds that I'm in, there's this concept of polarization. So sometimes when you're trying to, build a narrative and make a point, you are crafting a message that will polarize the public, hopefully to your side. Like, for example, a message like Black Lives Matter, right? Is designed so that most people will agree with that statement. And that they'll be like, it's forcing you to take a stance on that statement. Right? Black Lives Matter. Either you believe that or you don't. And if you believe that, you're with us. And if you don't, you are not with us. Right.
Right.
And so that's an example of polarization, right? Where most people, it's a yes or no question. And hopefully most people come with you. Right. And then, but in asking a quote unquote divisive question, then you're going to get some people who make their identity around no. They don't matter, or trans lives don't matter, whatever the message is. And sometimes as your progress is rising, the counter forces are also rising as well. And I really feel like we're in that moment in some element in the struggle for queer rights, but especially in trans rights, where as we're getting a lot, where trans people are being a lot more accepted in a lot of ways in society, there's also this growing vocal disgusting anti-camp. And so it's scary. And I also think it's also part of what winning looks like, and what actually building queer power looks like, is that there's going to be people who are afraid of it. And I try to, instead of being depressed about it, try to think about it through that lens. Cause I think the reason why there's all these like anti-trans people is partially because they see trans people more, so yeah, that was a bit of a ramble about that, but
that is literally the point. This is the point, is just to hear you ramble and talk about whatever you want to talk about. But I think even on that it is like, it's so, I guess there's so much of kind of, we've talked about this, but like the challenges or the barriers, but then there's also like where we find our power, which
Mm,
I like to come around to that because I realize like a lot of people are like, yeah, it sucks, Matt and Evie. Thanks for the reminder. But and which I think is an important reminder, especially because
mhm,
most people or a lot of people listening probably or possibly don't have any personal connection to being queer other than hearing like the sounds of our voices. And so I am curious though, as you mentioned, like your organizing community, like what has that community looked like and kind of been like for you, and what does that organizing even looked like?
yeah. Yeah, so my main entry point really is within the Jewish community. So
Mm,
I became involved right after when was yeah, like early 2017, I became involved in this organization called If Not Now, which
mm-hmm,
is basically a Jewish group working to transform the Jewish American community to
mm-hmm,
stand for Palestinian rights and against the occupation of Palestinians in Israel Palestine.
yeah,
And yeah, it's a deeply, I think a lot of American Jews, this is a topic that is deeply personal and sensitive. And so I'm sure there are people out there that really don't agree with
yeah,
that messaging. And that's for them.
mm-hmm,
But it's deeply, really important to me. And it was a really transformative arc of my life, actually, that becoming important to me and doing work around that. And um, yeah, and it really like became this yeah, doing that work really like opened up a lot for me about who I am and my identities, and also like connecting with Judaism in a different way. And it led me to finding this like huge, beautiful Jewish left, a lot queer community. And now I live in Jamaica Plain in Boston, which is one of the most flagship centers of the queer Jewish left world,
oh wow,
and it's
it's
beautiful.
impressive.
Yes, and yes, that is a beautiful little niche community that I'm really blessed to be part of. Um, yeah, and it was an example of, I think, yeah, I don't know how much to get into this here, but I think it's
Man.
an example really of, I was really raised thinking one thing about what is happening in Israel Palestine, and
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot more as I grew up. And really, it felt deeply important to be doing active work around that. And yeah, and sometimes in life you have to do a lot of unlearning of things. And yeah, yeah, and that led me to like also discovering how cool and powerful organizing and activism is in general. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and there were some, I got involved in some other things and other ways through that. Like I've been involved in this group, Never Again Action, which is another Jewish group that's Jewish solidarity with immigrants and ending
Mm-hmm.
ending deportation in the United States and things like that. And I did a little bit with union organizing my campus. So like there have been a couple different lenses of this, but yeah, the thing that I always feel really drawn to with organizing is this idea that people have power, and that
Yeah.
collective action and collective rising up really does have power in society when you can actually harness it, and when you are able to like take off the shackles that are designed to keep us from not doing that and from being,
Mm-hmm.
just being content in our little separate lives. That if you can actually come together and have solidarity and work together, like things can really change. um
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really interesting about that too, and again, I just feel like I'm like picking up where you leave off, but like the thing I think that's also really powerful about organizing or even just doing any type of work or action where you realize that you have power is that that power doesn't need to remain exclusive to organizing or exclusive to that issue.
Mm,
And so like realizing your power in space of organizing or something that's more political, for example, or, you know, more issues based or whatever it might be, also allows you to bring that power into like your interpersonal relationships and like stand up for yourself. And also like having community, I found really increases my power in so many ways, where when I feel like I need to speak up for people, including people of my identities, but also other identities, it's like, if you know you have that community to fall back on and you know you have that power, like it makes it so much less scary to do the right thing or say the right thing or even like prioritize your own needs and being and all of the things. So
yes, yes, absolutely. And I think, yeah, there's so many lessons from like doing that type of work that, yeah, like you said, really applies in all aspects of your life. Like, for example, you know, meeting people where they're at and like learning their life story and trying to, you know, find that connection with them and things like that, like are just good, important things in life. And I just really, everything you said about community also feels extremely, extremely true. And like, it's the thing that I'm so grateful to the organizing world for giving me, is this like beautiful community that I get to be a part of now. And like, there's so many ways in which, yeah, having that really does like upend a lot of, or like fight against a lot of the forces that really are, you know, like capitalism, for example, that like really like, yeah, really can bring you down and like make that, you know, there's this sense in like American society sometimes of this like individualism, right? And that you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all that. And it's like, well, that's not really possible without other people. And like being in community with people and having people to help you and support you. And if you lose your job, that can help you, you know, and yeah, I feel that's something that like being in community is something that's really important to me, and feels like something that I really want to make sure is part of my life always. Yeah. Another little ramble there, but yeah, it's important.
But that's
and
what
I think,
it's about.
yeah, and I think there's something really cool about this like RHAP world, to bring it back to this, where like, you know, there's like there's the communities in my IRL, you know, but the connection that people have through Rob as a podcast and through Survivor and through these like other shows where people can debate and discuss and Twitter and all that. Like, I mean, sometimes it can be isolating, but I think there's this particular community, like the reason why Pod Friends exists is because this is like a really special, beautiful thing. And I think actually something I was really feeling, to go back to, you know, what we were saying at the beginning of this, is that when I wasn't watching Survivor and therefore wasn't listening to these podcasts because I didn't want to be spoiled on it, I was like missing these people. You know what I mean? Like I was missing having Rob in my ears, you know, and getting to like interact with the community in that way. And like, I think that is what's so beautiful about, I think what happens in this network is that there's really does feel like a sense of like bringing people in and giving people a connection. And I've experienced that when I got to go to the like RHAP live event and some of Bryce and Wendell's events, you know, where it's just like, is this like beautiful, actual, real human people community in some ways, you know? And I think it's really cool to see. I think this was kind of what we're trying to do with the Pride Has Spoken also, of like, how can we translate this community that is in some, you know, is centered around reality TV or whatever it is, to like, to be actually something really powerful for people. And I think it already organically is that in a lot of ways. And it's cool to see ways that we could like think about harnessing that more actively, you know?
Yeah, and it's always powerful, like when it comes to community, to think about like what's the impact, or what's like what kind of impact does that have on us? But one of the things that, or kind of what impact do we have on the community? Because I think it could really be a reciprocal relationship. But you know, with the Pride Has Spoken, like I think one is that is like the cool one of the coolest podcast series out there. And I feel like I felt that from so many people who were like tuned in and paying attention to it. And I wish that there was more space like that in the Survivor landscape. I mean, me personally, I wish that Survivor created more spaces of celebration, especially for the people who come from these backgrounds that haven't always been represented on the shows, on the different seasons. And but anyway, like, one of the things that I think about is that you had the distinct honor and privilege. I'm looking at you, jealous, but having all these conversations with incredible survivors. And I wonder, like, beyond the people that we spoke with, which people could go back, and I think you could probably go to robhasawebsite.com/the Pride Has Spoken feed. Maybe that's it. That's probably the link.
I bet if you Google Rob is a podcast, Pride Has Spoken,
it will come. It will come up. It will come up. And there's a feed for that, and subscribe and all the things. But if you go back to that, like, are there other people who you're like, I want to talk with that queer survivor whenever, if ever, we do that again?
Oh my God. I mean, there's so many more. I want to talk to every queer survivor, you know, like, I mean, because everybody's got their own stories. Okay. There's a couple, maybe not, but
those are self-explanatory.
Self-explanatory. Yeah. Because I think actually, like, what was really cool in the last episode of the Pride Has Spoken, where we had everyone send in voice clips, like people that we weren't able to do full interviews with, was just like, how many of us there actually are. Like, it feels like even in the dark ages, in the first season, we had two openly queer contestants with Richard and Gretchen. Is that her name? Gretchen, right? And that's
we'll go back. We'll go Gretchen. Wait,
Gretchen, Survivor, Borneo. Yeah, Gretchen. That's her name.
Good to make sure that it's Gretchen.
Yes, it's Gretchen. And like,
with Richard and Gretchen.
Yeah, on the first season, there were two queer players with Richard and Gretchen. And like, something that was really cool in talking to some of the people, like especially my conversation with Amy Cusack, like, when the show was first, like in the early seasons, the show was one of the biggest freaking shows on TV in a time where people were watching TV in a way that people don't watch TV now, you know, like we're talking like, you know, like, I think something like in the 30 million viewers or something for the season 1 finale. I might even be lowballing that, you know? And so it's like, really, but every survivor has their own unique personal story, which I think is amazing, and is every single one is different and deserves to be told. And like this arc, like, you know, I'm interested in the evolution, I'm interested in the history, I love the evolution of strategy as a series, you know, and like the evolution of queer representation on Survivor is something that's so interesting to me. And that arc, you know, of like going from a show that was in 2001, and that environment where you have Randy, you know, like you have people using the freaking F word, like on the show, and to the place that we're at now, where, you know, my season had so many queer contestants, 42, 43. And that's so beautiful, that arc. And like, I think it's really hard for us in the now to even possibly fathom what it was like for them. Like Amy was telling me about how, you know, she was almost the first woman kiss on national television. And then they didn't even show it, you know, but it was this build up and then they didn't show it, you know? And it's wild. So I would love to, you know, like people like John Carroll. There's so many people in those early seasons, especially, that I feel like, I would just be so interested in hearing their perspective. And I think, like, you know, it's still hard in the modern seasons to get a sense of a full person. And I think they're making an effort to do that more with like the backstories and like, you know, flashbacks and things like that. And some of those early seasons, I'm sure there's so much missing from our understanding of those people. And I think it's like really cool that we have this TV show that's actually been on long enough to like have this whole arc. And we got to have a season 2, you know, that's all I'm saying.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I mean, look, we'll talk, whatever. I feel like it's a question of when or whenever we're ready for it, or whenever we want it, especially because of how well it was received. Doesn't even need to happen during Pride Month. That's the beauty of it. We're not, we can't be put in a box or any other receptacle for that matter.
You can't limit us to June, okay?
I don't know who that's. I was gonna say I don't think that's directed at Rob.
No.
That's is that
That was
directed at
directed.
Grace?
That was no. That was directed at like the man,
Me?
capital T, capital M, not
Yes.
not the podcast daddy.
Yeah, we love Daddy. And speaking
We
of
love
loving
daddy.
Daddy, I don't know. I guess like there's so much I feel like we could be here talking about and diving into, but I one question I'll ask you is like, I don't know, Evie, were there like other parts of yourself you were like, I really want to bring this to the podcast today? I ask because I could imagine like even between the science and queerness and then like even being part of the Jewish community and all these
Mhm.
other things that there's so much that's like interesting about you that people would ask about or think about. Plus, I don't even know if I just said Survivor, but also Survivor. And I'm just like, what do you want to be asked about? That's my question. Take
Oh my
that.
god. I don't know. Let, wow, I'm like, there's more to
I'm
me
just
than
gonna
those
stare at
things,
you.
but what is it? I mean,
That's a great question.
I think something that pops into my brain,
Oh wow.
which I'm pulling for something here a little bit.
We love it.
Like this thing just popped in my brain of like, I don't know, I feel like I did a monologue about my masculinity earlier in this. And I was a side thought that popped in my head is that like, okay, one thing that I don't know if people know is I love RuPaul's Drag Race.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, like there's something about like after I watch Drag Race, like I like am like have this like burst of femininity in a way that like I don't have in other parts. And I just was reflecting, I don't know that why that popped into my head, but it's this like cool thing that happens where like somehow like drag queens can bring out the femininity in me that like even as an AFAB person I like don't normally have in my life. And it was just making me think about a topic that, I talk about queer shit all the time. This isn't a new topic for me, but you know, I just like I don't put me in a box, like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that was a little ramble that
That
came
was
on in my head.
to T capital T capital M the man.
Yeah, don't put me in a freaking box.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but I think that's also really interesting because that says, I don't know, to me that makes me feel good in a way
Mm,
because it shows that like it's cool to know that you can access femininity if you want to,
mhm,
or that there are elements of that that resonate with you, and that it's not like this horrible
mhm,
thing to access, which I can imagine for a lot of people it is,
mm.
because of various experiences they might have been through. But also it's like, who could watch Drag Race and not, you know what I mean? Because
Yes.
I think it's like this beautiful thing that exists beyond like I don't even, well, I guess there's so much you could say when it comes to gender, within gender and beyond it and
Yeah.
beside it and like under it and over it and all of the things. But I think like that's kind of the thing that's really cool is like, I don't know, just there's people are complicated
Yeah.
and you're a complicated person and you
Yeah.
deserve to be complicated. Everyone deserves to, have all the sides to themselves. And so I'm just glad that you have that and
Yeah.
that you're like, I don't know, just like recognizing that and the complexity of that. Like, don't try to put me in a box. We have to put that on a t-shirt.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Another thing, while we're in the musings part, I mean, another thing that comes to mind is topic of it's so weird that in my Survivor season, it's all she, which is because that I was using she at the time. Like no one's
Yeah.
doing anything wrong. But it's so weird that that's like what is enshrined, And like I actually last night to like gear up for this, I was like, I just put on a little bit of the premiere episode of my season because I just really
Wow.
hadn't looked at it in a while, and it honestly brings me a lot of joy.
Mm-hmm.
And it just is so weird. And I try not to dwell on I try not to be it's not like sad per se. I mean, it is. I have a little sadness about it because it's like, okay, so whenever I watch this forever, there's going to be this twinge of, and again, no one is doing anything wrong. It's just, it's that I've evolved, and it's I wish that there could be something where like there's a note on the show at the beginning, like, hey, just FYI, when you're tweeting at Evie in the future, like, or whatever. I just like, it does feel sad that it's like the moment where I had the most eyes on me and it's recorded forever. I wasn't doing that for myself. And I think when I was first talking about that kind of stuff in right after my season, I was really focused on wishing that I could have represented the non-binary community better or something like that. Like really putting it on what I could have done for others if I had been using they on the show. Right. And I really have like released that because it's like, that's where I was. So and it's an authentic part of my journey. And I'm sure so many people's journeys that, your pronouns change over time and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And for me as a person, it is sad that like, in that it's just that people didn't know me in that way at that time, and that I figured it out like right then, and it's just like a bummer in some sense,
Yeah. I mean, like the other thing, just to give you added grace, is that shout to Grace leader.
No, Grace isn't here. We need her.
Yeah, just to give you added grace though, too. It's like and you said the phrase that jumped out to me is like nobody was doing anything wrong. And I mean, the only place I would disagree with that is like in the broader context of a society that, like didn't immediately or doesn't immediately embrace more than the binary when it comes to gender. And, like that's the part that's unfortunate. And I think that, I actually the other piece of this too that I think is interesting. I was just watching The Traitors on Peacock, which is a great show. No spoilers.
I haven't seen. I literally was planning on starting watching it tonight. I'm really excited.
It's great, but I think one thing that they do, I'm pretty sure, just thinking back about my rewatch because I like binged it over the last week, was that there's not like a division by genders in any way. I mean, I think in terms of the casting, they probably like considered their gender diversity to some extent, and I believe I think there might be a non-binary person on the show. And I also appreciate how like so often when it comes to this one character or when this one character and player person that they're getting like they pronouns, which is really phenomenal. And it took me some time to be like, wait, we have a non, like I didn't even think about it along the way. But I think I mean, I love Survivor. I know that we love Survivor, and there's always the future. There are future things that could happen with Survivor, and people being on them. Maybe I don't know, one of us. Who knows? One of us might be there. But I'm just saying, one of us. Yeah, one of us,
both of us,
or both of us. I don't know. You gonna be there for my loved one's visit, or
if I'm invited,
yeah. You're invited.
Wow. Okay, take that, Matt's friends and family.
No, I mean, look, I know what's gonna get the ratings, Evie. But I just feel like I don't know. I just wish that shows tied like a little bit less to gender, and I feel like that's where we might be going one day. But
and
you're amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, and I firmly like. Yeah, you might say, oh, well, how could Survivor ever not be gendered? Because, it's always been, but it's like, are you freaking kidding me? How could Survivor have an hourglass twist? Like those are creative devils and on the production team, and they can do whatever the hell they want. And this is not, I don't mean this as a criticism. I mean this as a, like I
they
believe
could figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Like I actually believe that they can and are fully capable of figuring that out, and that
Yeah.
I honestly think one day they will. I really hope so.
We're so close to it. And like the thing I would even say is like, and I'm not the best Survivor historian, but like going back, I'm sure 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, as the series started, that there were things designed in the game that were very gendered. Whereas now, I mean, we just see so much more competition that's not like, okay, we're going to have like the men on this side and women on, and so I feel like we're getting away even from the need for that. Now there will be people who are going to critique the come on in guys of it all, but to them I have to say screw them, because they need to catch up with the times, because we're living in 2023 and they need to figure it out. But also it's just like, it's so unnecessary is like the thing I feel like about Survivor. And I hope that even as you like watch the latest season, I don't know, that like you just realize like, oh, there's not, I love that there's not a ton in terms of the gender embedded into the game structure. There will always be biases and how people are perceived and all of that. But I think that it's nice to envision a world where things could change, and things have changed, so they should keep changing for the better, to be more inclusive.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a great point about there's structural things that can be changed. And then there's also our society and what everybody's biases are that they bring into the game and everything like that. And both fronts need to be worked on. You know what I mean? Like you can't, there's always people are going to have biases because society is biased. And also there could be, and that is something that I think is changing more and more. And also there's structures in the game that could be changed. Like obviously 3 quote unquote men, 3 quote unquote women on every tribe is a structural issue that they can figure it out. I feel confident that they can figure it out. You know?
I believe in them. Yes. But Evie, it's been so great diving into your evolution, as one might say.
Yes.
I'm sure that that's not the first time you've heard that. For better, for worse, probably.
I'm pretty sure Rob made the same joke on my deep dive.
See, Rob and I are like the same person.
Definitely great minds.
Like literally, if anyone's just listening to the audio, picture Rob. I'm Rob Sester. Hello, everybody, and I'm Rob Sesternino, come to you live from my apartment with the evolution. Ding. I don't.
Okay, but that was fully the combo of Rob intro with Matt wrestling intro. Definitely coming to you live. That was definitely a combo platter. I like that.
Oh my gosh. I will. Yes, it's amazing. And that's not the first time that Rob has coached me on how to do my best Rob. So
my God,
if anyone wants the video of that, let me know and I'll send it to you. I'm not posting it anywhere. I will text it to you. Evie, I have to ask.
Yes.
I always ask the questions. I do. And at the end, I always ask the question specifically of, if your life were a book or documentary, I would love to know, what would the title be and why?
I should have prepared for this.
I hear the tension. There's so much that's going on. Evie is thinking, looking off into the distance, peeking over.
I feel like I once had an answer to this question, is what I'm like. I feel like this is I feel like, honestly, I feel like it's corny, but you know what? I got my yay tattoo.
Yeah. Wait, we didn't even go into the tats.
Oh yeah. Okay.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. So I have 3 tattoos. The first one is my yay tattoo, which you can see in some shots on the show. And it's a yay with basically like a rainbow lined underneath. And I got it in a moment, like about a year after I came out, and it's all about queer joy and the joy of being myself. And I think that journey of like being more and more myself, and how being more and more myself leads to more and more joy, is the central tenet of my life in a lot of ways. So I think the book is Yay: Becoming Me by Evvie Jagoda, the Evvie Jagoda story. What do you think?
Okay. I love it. I think it's great. I thought it was just gonna be yay.
Yeah, I mean it's yay, and then you know, and then the so that you understand what the book is, you know, you got to give them
Ooh.
something, you know, the joy of being yourself, the joy of
Ooh.
finding yourself, something like that.
You just write it. Like, hopefully, when we finish this interview, you just stop and write the whole thing,
Yeah.
and that's all that the world needs. Because
Yeah.
I'm a little mad that I don't have Yay becoming me to read.
Okay,
Evie,
wait.
taking out those guns!
Just before we go, just
Not literal
obviously
guns.
it's most people are podcasters, but if you're watching the audio,
Hold on.
you can see my new
I will zoom in on you for a second. There we
so
go.
you know, you might remember the Yasa turtles, which was
Mhm.
a really crazy thing that happened on my season when we found, well, Tiffany will want me to say, when Tiffany noticed that there were thousands of baby turtles hatching on our beach, and it was the most cool thing I've ever seen in my life, and it was really powerful, this thing of these little tiny turtles doing this big crazy adventure. And so I got these sea turtles on my arm to remind me of that and my whole survivor journey, and also
Wow.
just like the whole thing of, you know, being a little struggling thing against the big mighty universe, and that you still have power and can do things. And yeah, I love the turtles, and I actually got this tattoo with Tiffany in Long Island. She got a different tattoo, but Tiffany's a badass, and she will drive around with you to multiple Long Island tattoo parlors looking for a walk-in place to
Good to know.
get your tattoo.
I might have to have her on Pod Friends at some point,
Oh
just
my
to be
God.
like, just to dive in, just to be like, what are you doing? What is going on? Because
You have
that's
to.
one thing I've admired so much is, and honestly, like, my favorite thing about anybody is when they love you, Evie.
Mm.
So just a shout out to Tiffany for loving you.
Dude, Tiffany, my friendship with Tiffany is absolutely one of the best things that came out of my time on Survivor. I mean, she is an absolutely wonderful person in so many ways,
Oh,
and like my biggest cheerleader. Like, she's really just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human who I love so much.
oh.
And yeah, she's the best. And yeah, you should talk to her. I mean, she's also a riot, but also like so wise. You know, she's all the things.
I love that though. And like that's the thing. And that's the thing I love even about these conversations. It's like going deeper beyond
Hmm.
the shows, beyond the normal conversations, beyond all of that. So Tiffany, one day
One
we'll
day.
talk.
And
But Evie,
yes.
I see that big old tattoo
Yes. So
of
then
something. Okay.
the big one, which again, yeah, this is a lot for mostly audio medium.
Yeah,
I
you're
call this
describing them.
my flower dude tattoo,
Uh-huh.
which features a kind of gender ambiguous person that's kind of like surrounded by beautiful, weird flowers, and he's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like growing with them. And
Oh.
this one for me is about sometimes I forget that I need water and air, and I need to like water myself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And put some intentional care and effort into me and my growth and
Yeah.
my self. And this tattoo is kind of about that. And yeah, that's the big picture message, and a fun small message around it. Well, I mean, it's not small, but when I was working with the tattoo artist on
Yeah.
this, I like could not figure out what to give them as a reference for the body of the
Mm-hmm.
person, and like what's that person's gender, and are they a woman,
Yeah.
or are they a man, or are they something else, and what's the picture going to look like. And so I was working with the artist, and we were googling like androgynous person, and we kind of, and then eventually she suggested, what about male ballerina? And so I think maybe male ballerina might be my gender. And this image comes from a really cool male ballerina, and it was a really cool like masculinity, femininity, strength
What?
thing. So
You're too
yeah.
cool. You're too cool, and I'm always so fascinated by people's tattoos, but I also will like rarely ask about them because I'm
Hmm.
not like, tell me about that thing on your body for whatever,
Hmm.
because but I appreciate you sharing because I think it's like awesome to always hear the stories. Also, because I see there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room for you to grow, to build out the full
Oh my God,
sleeves.
it's addicting, honestly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Any tattoos that you're thinking of getting next?
Ooh, no, not at the moment, honestly. Although
Good.
as a visual, yeah, right.
Well, no,
As a,
mostly because I'm like, you don't need to put that out there on the podcast, but
so true.
I would love it.
So true. I mean, as a visual, I'm like, should the turtles have like seaweed around them? I'm like, I could imagine, but I'm like, okay, calm down, Evie.
Building on it.
Yeah.
There's the possibility, and I think if anything, like it, just like with your tattoos, there's so much of a picture to paint.
Yes.
And I don't know, I'm like, I went, the analogies were in a 1-for-1 there, but I think that there's
pictures to paint. Yes,
so much all the pictures.
No, but I mean, it really is true. Like when I got my first tattoo, I was like, I could never imagine anything else being as important to me as this, and it's like, nothing, it's like important things in your life don't have to be like this versus this. You know what I mean? It's like different things are at the front of my mind now than were at front of my mind then. And I'm sure these tattoos will feel like a snapshot of this time at some other time, and some other thing will come to the front. So that's life.
Wow. That's deep. And we could totally just end the episode there, but I just want to give you the chance to, I don't know. Is there anything you want to say to the people as we wrap up?
I just want to say, yes, thank you for this opportunity, Matt. I think I really genuinely, like, when I think back on my Survivor experience, like, I just really think that the RHAP world and like people listening to this podcast is just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. And it is so scary deciding to be on a national TV show and with everything with social media and all that. And like, what an absolute joy that there exists this community that is so in general kind and supportive. And even when there's debate, it's like about the game, you know what I mean? Generally, I'm not saying things never get heated, but I think like it just really is special that it feels like this community does see reality TV show contestants as people. And I just think that's beautiful. And I think that like it encourages seeing each other as fuller humans, and in an online space, which I think is wild. And I think everything that this network does to try to, bring forth relevant issues like identity and things like that, and talk about them in a real way in relation to these like otherwise potentially not the most serious or most important shows, and I just think it's really, really, really special. And I think sometimes when I tell people that I was on reality TV, I have a sense, I feel compelled to be like, oh, it's reality TV. But also it's really freaking important in a lot of ways because it is this thing that is in your home and you see all these people. And like, I think this network really does beautiful stuff to like really like, I don't know, bring that out to the fullest and make it the most impactful that it can be. And I think I just want to say, Matt, I think you're one of the people that does that the most. And I feel really honored that I get to know you and that I've gotten to work with you through this because I've learned a lot from you. And I just think you're doing amazing work. And this podcast, this Pod Friends, is beautiful and amazing. And the episodes I've listened to have all been amazing. And yeah.
Evie in high demand, places to go, people to see, things to do. You have nothing ever to apologize for, and just sending you so much love for all this. And thank you for being part of this.
You're the best, Matt. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this conversation with my friend and yours, Evie. And I love Evie. I love talking with Evie. I love all the time that we have. I love the fun, the sarcasm. I also love the depth that we get into. And, it's really powerful, I think, to see, at least for me, that, someone like Evie, who is an inspiration and definitely inspired me and helped me feel more belonging in this Survivor world, is also someone who we can interact with. And that's what this podcast, Pod Friends, is all about. It's about the community. It's about realizing that we're all more alike than we are different. It's about getting to know each other beyond what we already know. And if you want to stay on the journey to get to know folks for Pod Friends, you could subscribe at robhasawebsite.com/podfriendsfeed. Make sure you are subscribed to the Pod Friends feed. That will go a long way. Those subscriptions really do matter to keeping the lights on. So would love for you to do that. And also, I just want to invite folks to leave a voicemail. You could go to speakpipe.com/podfriends to leave a voicemail with your thoughts, and it might even show up here on the show. Or I'll just listen and get in touch, and we could be pod friends. Also, like I said last week with Mike, and I hope the trend continues, show Evie some love. Show some podcasters some love. Let people know that you appreciate them. Let your friends, your family know that you appreciate them. Not to be morbid, but we don't always have that opportunity, and people need it. It goes a long way, and your voice matters. Your love matters. It's mattered to me in light of this season of Pod Friends, in light of other Pod Friends episodes. And again, if you want to get in touch with me, reach out at MattScottGW on the various platforms. I'm so grateful for all of you. I seriously, genuinely am, and just want to wish you the best in your own journey. Hope that you'll tune in next week for my conversation with, drumroll please, Jessica Leese. And we dove into so much for that. So I'm really excited for you to hear that. But until next time, last but not least, I just want to thank you for being a Pod Friend. Thanks, everyone. Lots of love.